So, welcome back to 3rd Age Reforged and to another battle replay, and as you can see from the men stood in front of you and from the locale, we are at the Golden Hall and by extension Edoras for another battle replay. Not too long ago actually that I showed off Edoras. I remember it because it was one of the first battles I actually recorded in my new locale. However, seldom do we actually seem to see Rohan actually defend their own settlement. It seems to have been a bit of a theme with Edoras for quite a while. I think, from my memory, I've only ever shown Rohan actually defend their own settlement once, at least exclusively, and that is going to be the case once again. A battle replay is sent to me by Overlord, so big thank you to him, and it is going to be two Rohan armies, and it's also a very lore-appropriate battle in many ways, because the two armies that are on the attack today are going to be two forces from Dunland, so this we could look at as being Wulf's attack on Edoras, where ultimately that day, of course, he did sit upon the throne of Edoras. We shall see if Dunland are able to repeat that feat today against the Rohirrim that are defending their capital. We'll go through the Dunlanders first of all, I suppose, given that they are the challengers here. Starting off with ROHIRRIC 096. Obviously Dunland cannot rely much on quality at all. They do have a couple of really high quality units actually that they can use, which is surprisingly effective in pretty much any situation, but we'll get onto them in a moment, I'm sure. The main body of their army, however, is going to have to be made up of numerous low-tier units and decent, half-decent mid-tier units. But it is going to have to be a numbers game for them, which I think is for the best, given Edoras is what it is. It's very unlikely that you're going to be able to really dislodge the defenders if they're dug in nicely in Edoras, and if they play their cards right. It's a really good settlement to defend if you're doing things correctly. Very often we don't see people doing things correctly, of course, but that's by the by. We've got some Dunlanding clansmen. Obviously with Rohan being on the defence within Edoras, you're expecting a little bit of cavalry to come outside the gate, so the Dunlanding clansmen are not only going to be useful as the really numerous unit of spears that you can flood the settlement with, but also in the early stages perhaps, if cavalry does decide to sally out, not only are they spears, but also Dunlanders have got a slight bonus against cavalry units that is natural to them, so this is a very effective unit of basic spears to bring to the table. Of course, while Dunland are a faction, the Dunlander units themselves are actually fairly limited within the faction, so it is worth saying that the Dunlanding clansmen get the Dunland bonus against cavalry, but something like the Dunman Hunters back here, which are of course a Rudauer unit, do not have it. And of course the Dunman Hunters are a very basic unit of archers indeed. Dunland have got one thing going for their skirmish game which is really exceptional, but other than that you're going to be reliant on very basic archers to do things the Orcish way, essentially. Bury your enemy under a hailstorm of low quality but very numerous arrows. And to be fair, this sort of tactic can work out quite nicely against Rohan. Rohan themselves, after all, are not the most heavily armoured of the Western Kingdoms by any means, so this kind of attack can actually do a little bit more damage to them than it would do against a Gondor, for example, or an Arthur Dane. Over here we've got some Warg Riders, or Warg Riders. Again, I can only assume that they were brought to try and counteract any Rohirric cavalry that may come out of the settlement. Wargs are of course anti-cavalry. Rohan's cavalry lineup, however, is a little bit more than just your basic run-of-the-mill lancers and perhaps a unit of knights to back them up. They've got a lot of numbers to their mounted units, and also they've got stuff like horse archers, which can counteract Wargs very effectively if you can micro them well. But for Dunland, this is a bit of a no-brainer, I think, to bring at least a unit of Wargs per army so that you're not completely defenceless. We've seen in the past, especially small elven armies really get bullied out here in the outer reaches of Rohan by enemy cavalry forces, and clearly that is something Dunland will hope to avoid with all of their anti-cavalry that they have at their disposal. Speaking of which, Dunlanding veterans, the line infantry of Dunland, which are a similar kind of tier to stuff like the Uruk-hai Raiders. They do wield an axe, which makes them a little bit more damaging than other units of a similar type. Also, as a Dunlander unit, they do have a slight bonus against cavalry. Now, they are still line infantry, so if they get charged, they're still going to get absolutely flattened. But if cavalry does linger too long in melee with them, they will do a little bit more damage than you would think. Plenty of them, and yeah, the Dunlanding veterans are a very nice unit to have in this situation, at least with regards to the options you have as Dunland. Back here we have one of the really exceptional units that Dunland have, the Spears of Orthanc. The Riders of Orthanc we'll also get onto in just a moment, but this of course, Saruman outfitting the finest of Dunland's warriors with the best of armour from Orthanc's forges. They also come equipped with a really nasty crossbow and a nasty armour-piercing spear. They really have a little bit of everything. Crossbows are of course something that Rohan themselves cannot boast having, and if it comes down to it in the late game, we've seen the stopping power of crossbows be so effective in the past. This is something that Dunland could really leverage, and indeed will need to leverage, I think, in order to really make gains in the settlement. Timing is going to be everything for them, however. It is also worth saying as well that it is arguable that in melee the Spears of Orthanc can also outstrip anything that Rohan have. That's a little bit more debatable though. Rohan do have stuff like the Helms Hammers, which are a line infantry armor piercing unit, but Spears of Orthanc with that cavalry bonus could be even more useful on this occasion. Some half-orc Bane Guards, so more troops on loan from Isengard. Again, a bit of armor piercing, which is not as effective, like I said, against Rohan as it would be against other Western kingdoms, but it's still going to be useful, especially for some of the higher tier Rohan units where armor does start to creep up a little bit more. Shock infantry is one of those areas where you would imagine Rohan may have the upper hand, depending on the amount of black wolds on the field, and we'll get on to Rohan in a moment, but I'm sure they will have brought some of their nasty axeman. More Dunland clansmen. Here we have the Riders of Orthanc, which are the mounted variants of the unit we just spoke about. This again gives them a little bit of manoeuvrability against enemy cavalry sallies, and those crossbows can be really effective at dealing with some of the more high priority targets among the Rohirrim mounted units. They're really good in melee against other cavalry as well, pulling out a wicked looking Morning Star. So Rohan won't want to be getting into melee one-on-one with the Riders of Orthanc, but they should have the numbers and the speed to outmaneuver units such as that. More Dunman Hunters and Dunland clansmen, and I can only imagine this is far too small an army for a standard Dunland force, so I would imagine what we're going to see, possibly, some Black Wolds, possibly some Trollshort Axe Throwers and other nasties as well. Probably going to be a similar story over here with Tiny Pants, who's playing as a second Dunland force. Another unit of Warg Riders. We'll go through this army slightly fast because I imagine it's going to be much a similar story over here, with similar units being hidden as well, I would guess. More Half-Orc Bane Guard for that little bit of armor piercing punch. He's actually got some Half-Orc Spear Guard as well, which I believe have the... No, I don't think they do actually. They don't have the armor upgrade, which gives them a little bit more, at least a patchwork attempt at Uruk-hai armor for the Half-Orcs. They are pretty good at keeping themselves alive. They can act as a nice solid centre to a Dunland push, but they won't do that much damage, even against the more lightly armoured Rohirrim. This is going to be more the defensive aspect of the Dunland push, I would imagine. More Half-Orc Spearguard pushing up a ram, and more Dunman Hunters for that range pressure. Plenty of Spearguard on this side of the field actually, so quite a different army indeed. Another unit of Spears of Orthanc, fantastic for all the reasons we have already mentioned. As we move over here, he's got a second unit of Warg Riders, another unit of Half-Orc Bane Guard, and another unit of Riders of Orthanc. So all of the good stuff for Dunland, and plenty more units will pop into view, I'm sure, when the battle is getting underway. Now then, for the defenders, Overlord has got some Eastmark Axemen, which in many ways actually are a slightly weaker version of the Dunlanding veterans that they will be facing off against. Of course, Rohan are going to have to make do with a little bit less money than the attackers today, so we may very well get to see actually quite a lot of the more entry-level Rohan units, which we scarcely get to see. We scarcely get to see Rohan at all, to be fair, in this version of the game, so it's nice to see the green and Anglo-Saxon helms that we see going on here. They're going to be here trying to hold on to the front line. We also have some Riddermark spears, which are basic spears for Rohan. They'll do decently at holding the line, but again, they will struggle when it comes to killing units quickly, which, considering the amount of Dunland infantry that may very well be crashing down on them, that may prove to be a problem if they aren't backed up properly. Eastmark spears are of course worse than them in melee, but they do come equipped with some basic javelins, which could be useful depending upon how they are used. That is really the key with javelins. We've got more Eastmark spearmen over here, got some Riddermark archers, very basic archers, going to be trading back and forth, I'm sure, with the likes of the Dunman Hunters. The Riddermark archers probably have a slight edge there in terms of armour, but it's really much of a muchness. Shield Maidens of Rohan could prove to be a really deadly foe for Dunland to fight. There's not many Dunland units that are going to be that resistant to the really high damage that the Shield Maidens can chuck out. Really nasty. One of the best Rohirrim units, for sure, with what they offer to the faction. More of them. Civilians are also over here. Coffee of the Light Cloud is going to be playing as the other Rohan army, which is an interesting name. I believe the civilians are actually getting removed from the general rotation in the next patch to make room for units that are a little bit more useful perhaps, so make the most of the farmers and the farmers' wives wielding their pitchforks and shovels while you can, because I don't think they're going to be sticking around for too much longer. Helmingas are the heavier Rohan archer. They will certainly have an edge over any archer that Dunland decides to try and skirmish them with. A little bit of a different story when it comes to dealing with the Dunland crossbows, of course, but to be fair, if Rohan find their archers getting shot up by the Riders or the Spears of Orthanc, they can consider that a bit of a win, because it means they're not going to be going after some of their more expensive infantry. Speaking of which, the MEDUSELD Guard are here guarding the they are actually for once guarding what they should be. And fantastic unit of javelins, of course. They are one of those high tier units of javelins. What sets them apart perhaps from many of their peers is the fact that they are actually very useful in melee as well. Again, Dunland, really it's only the spears of Orthanc that can hope to match them in melee. And then of course the javelins are really, really nasty. Again, timing going to be very critical there. 2 units of Westmark spears, so going for a little bit more of the quality perhaps is Coffee. And the Westmark spears will do a good job at holding the line, I'm sure. Again, don't really have anything on that level of quality outside of their bodyguard units. Civilians we've seen already, more Riddermark spears this time from Coffee. We do have some mounted units, but not as many as I thought there might be. Red Shields of Erkenbrand, melee cavalry combined with being heavy horse archers. Don't know why they're up here, perhaps. It would be more useful if they were able to escape the settlement quickly. On Edoras you need to get out of the settlement fast, otherwise you could find yourself bottled up, and Dunland have got enough tools to keep that cavalry bottled up until the end. Perhaps that's a blessing in disguise though. More Helmingas here at the top of the hill. Got some more Shield Maidens, some more Westmark Spears, some Riddermark Axemen, which are a unit of standard shock infantry, which are decently effective but kind of fragile. And then you have their big brothers in and amongst them as well with the Westmark Marshals, a really nice unit. One of my favourite units to look at in the game. I really like their style, but also they are effective as well, and we'll be able to crack through the heavier Dunland units, limited though they may be. Helms Hammers will offer very much the same thing. The bodyguard ROHIRRIC unit, wielding those hammers and those large shields, a very tanky unit indeed, which offsets the fact that I guess Rohan and Dunland do have that in common. Their bodyguard units are much tankier and much more well equipped than the vast majority of their other footmen. We also have the Westmark Infantry, which is a line infantry unit Dunland can't really match up to either. It's a bit of a rare situation this for Rohan, where they have a rather clear quality advantage and armour advantage really against their foe. It's not the sort of thing they are used to, but it is the sort of thing they can bring to bear against their, or at least one of their most hated rivals. I think Isengard would probably usurp that in the Third Age. MEDUSELD Guard, once again, more Westmark Marshals and more Westmark Infantry, and I believe there is another pocket of Rohirrim resistance down here. Indeed there is. A unit of Riddermark Archers, Westmark Spearmen, and a unit of Sons of Aeol. So once again, Coffee with 2 units of cavalry, which are not going to be able to escape the settlement quickly, but this is a really deadly unit if used correctly. But with 2 units of Riders of Orthanc, could be easily countered perhaps. Yeah, it is interesting to note that. Rohan also don't have access to body-piercing rangers. It is worth bearing that in mind as this battle is about to get underway, but this is perhaps a bit of a sneak peek, at least in spirit, to the next patch where you won't be able to rely on rangers to defend, so we shall see if Rohan are able to make that work for them on this occasion. I will probably make a little bit of a cut because I don't know exactly what's going to happen, if the cavalry is going to be allowed to escape, if Dunland are going to move forward immediately, we shall see. But yeah, I will rejoin when the battle is beginning. So we shall rejoin here, I believe, because the cavalry is going to make its way out of the settlement quickly, which I think is a good thing from Coffee of the Light Cloud over here. Because bottling your cavalry up, as I said, in the army composition phase within Edoras is really not a very good idea, especially considering you've got so much room to manoeuvre outside the settlement. It really is, perhaps as you would expect, one of the ideal settlements to sally out with a bit of cavalry. Now, Dunland, of course, like I said, do have that anti-cavalry bonus, which they can definitely use to their advantage, but something like the Sons of Aeol, especially if you back it up with the Red Shields of Erkenbrand to deal with the wargs and such, could be exactly the sort of thing to really start thinning out the not insubstantial Dunland numbers that are going to be descending upon Edoras' palisade walls. You need to be a little bit careful though. You do need to make sure that your cavalry is in a good position to micro. The Warg Riders are actually going to completely ignore the Red Shields, which is perhaps not the right way to go about it. The Red Shields, I mean, either one of these 2 cavalry units would probably be sufficient to defeat the wargs in one-to-one combat anyway. They're really just going to be here to try and stop the Rohirrim from getting their charges off. Red Shields starting to fire with a few volleys going forth, and they are going for the wargs by the looks of things, so that's good. But again, just a bit of a love tap from ROHIRRIC's wargs really onto the Sons of Aeol near the barrows out here. Yeah, the Sons of Aeol not taking any casualties from that, but they did take a partial charge from the wargs, which is not going to be great from their perspective, but Red Shield's getting back into the settlement now, being used perhaps as heavy archers more than anything else. Needs to make sure he keeps his knights moving here. He really doesn't want to get bogged down in and amongst the wargs too easily. Meanwhile, over this side, the other Dunlending army yet to really make any sort of moves in. Nice setup here from Overlord. He's got his disposable units near the gate, and he's got plenty of range support, even though it is basic, the most entry-level archers and javelins that Rohan have to offer ready to let loose. And they could go after the Vanguard as well. Not the worst target in the world. These Rohan archers are not the most damaging, of course, but even still, good opportunities. Riders of Orthanc here, and getting too close to the best of the Dunlanding mounted units has already taken a pretty hefty toll on the Sons of Eorl. There you can see many of them are bloodied up, many of them have also fallen to the bolts that those crossbows launch. The first real charge as the Lancers come down from the Sons of Eorl, and perhaps this is in response to knowing that this cavalry does have a rather limited shelf life, so he does charge into the Vanguard. He needs to cycle back out of there though as well, because armor-piercing shock infantry like this does do quite well in sustained melee combat against cavalry. That armor-piercing damage they deliver isn't too nice for cavalry units like the Sons of Eorl, so you do need to get them out of there, cycle back out, but it's going to be a painful time, this. There's going to be another volley of crossbow bolts at least, and then the wargs are also going to surround them. So not the best use of the ROHIRRIC cavalry, this, and indeed the Sons of Eorl do break as a result. Now, unsurprisingly, sandwiched between wargs and armor-piercing melee units and crossbow bolts coming in. All the while, Rohan's walls are being assaulted now. So not the best cavalry performance by any means, but not the end of the world for Rohan. When you're talking about such a numbers-heavy army like this, you can rely on your quality a little bit more in the choke points of Edoras. Perhaps a little bit more of a newer player as well, Coffee of the Light Cloud, electing not to move. Sooner or later all of these little cutscenes will cease. You can see here the Dunlanding veterans trying to get into the side of this well-prepared front line, but Dunland doing exactly the right thing and not simply walking right into the well-prepared Rohan shield wall. Instead they're going to try and attack it from the side with these veterans, Westmark Spearmen and Riddermark Spearmen, so it's all spears going up against the axe-wielding veterans. And you can see here the Riddermark Axemen also taking a lot of damage from the archers, the Gwathlo trackers that have revealed themselves, using their missiles to good effect against the Riddermark Axemen, and with their support the Dunlanding veterans should be able to make their way through these Rohan warriors. Meanwhile, over on the other side, some Dunman hunters getting into position, and the battle well and truly underway over here as well, but with Blackwolds leading the way into the settlements, it's going to be pretty nasty, but javelins and arrows being used more effectively by the Rohirrim over here rather than the Dunlanders on the other side. And those Blackwolds need to get out of harm's way pretty quickly. They're not taking losses for now, but as soon as their hit points are expended, they will start to drop like flies. And basic though those javelins may be, they will still do the business. Eastmark Axemen and Riddermark Spearmen, I should say, going to move in here to try and block the way and allow those missiles to do what damage they can. Meanwhile, also some javelins coming in from the attacking side, Snarker skirmishes making their presence felt, and plenty of those Riddermark Spearmen that are guarding the gate taking damage as a result, but it's actually through the breaches in the walls where most of the Dunland pressure is coming from so far. Eastmark Axemen and Riddermark Axemen going toe-to-toe with the Halford Vanguard. Arrows flying in from both sides, but on this breach you'd have to say Dunland have got the advantage there. They've got a clearer shot into the Rohan defenders, whereas the Vanguard, because of the terrain being what it is, you have to arc the shots for the Rohirrim, which is not great for them. Helmingas are up here on the high ground though, and what are they going after? A little bit more impressive with the damage they can deal and with their utility in melee than the Riddermark archers that are on display. When the changes to archers come in and rangers aren't such a dominant feature in the game, the Helmingas will actually make Rohan not a terrible foot archer faction being what they are. Not quite up to the same level as stuff like Balakith Marksman and so on, but it could stand to do far worse. Halford Vanguard coming in from the side, still attacking this Rohan front line, which still hasn't really moved from Coffee. He has managed to bring in, well, he's managed to shift over some Westmark Spearmen to stop the advance of the Dunlanding veterans, who at this point are very depleted. As much of a, for what they cost, they're a decent line infantry unit, but they are very cheap, so it gives you an idea of what they can actually accomplish. The Westmark Spearmen certainly a superior infantry unit to them. Halford Vanguard still doing their thing. Meanwhile, these Dunlanding veterans over here, in conjunction with those archers, like I said, are going to prove to be too much for the Riddermark Axemen. They do wear shields on their back, but the shield value is not all that substantial for the Riddermark Axemen and these basic Rohirrim units. Their armour is also not quite up to the standard of other Western kingdoms. Again, mentioned that before, but it does bear repeating, as that is proving to be their undoing here at the hands of these angry Dunlanders. But so far, Rohan's defence has not folded. Could change as the battle wears on. Now the Eastmark Spearmen out of their javelins, they are going to be added to the front line. They're not brilliant in melee, of course, but just adding more to the front line, allowing more time for these arrows to do their thing. And the Black Wolds that are in here, Riddermark Spearmen, are struggling a bit, but the Black Wolds are depleted now. Half-Orc Spearguard, this is actually where they will earn their keep. With their half-decent armour, their shields, these Spearmen will be able to absorb a decent amount of damage there. They're also starting to pour in through the gate now. I do quite like actually how aggressive the Dunlanders are being. Westmark infantry being added to the fray, exactly the sort of thing that will be needed against the Half-Orc Spearguard, because they will be able to outperform them in melee. Rohan going to try and showcase their superior quality heavier infantry in this particular matchup. Need to try and keep out of harm's way those javelins that are whistling overhead, but yeah, this front line over here not going so well once again. Over on this side, it is going to be the Riddermark Axemen, which are really suffering under all of these missiles. As useful as their armour piercing can be, they have been exposed for their weakness here by Dunland. Still more arrows coming down. You can see Snaga Skirmishes taking a bit of a beating. Riders of Orthanc getting close. Half-Orc Spearguard, more Black Wolds. Yeah, Rohan at this point looking like they may very well be looking to start pulling back. Starting to lose on some of these fronts, so they don't want the domino effect to come into place and many of their units to get cut off. That may also need to be the case over here, but you can see here ROHIRRIC has got some Trollshaw axe throwers into a pretty nice position, and they will be able to finish off this haphazard Rohan defence fairly quickly, you would think. Westmark Spearmen are surrounded, not quite on all sides, but the one side where they're clear is where the Trollshaw axe throwers are, but immediately also attracting some attention from the archers further up the hill. The Helmingast trying to focus them down, but yeah, here we go. With these throwing axes coming in, this is going to be bad news for Rohan, and all of these Westmark Spearmen will fall by the wayside. Another volley coming in there, more Dunlanding veterans making sure that they can't retreat back up the hill too easily. I quite like the way Dunland have approached this battle so far. They've got the numbers to be a little bit more reckless with it, so far so good. The main issue for them may be that Rohan's quality later on may start to become more and more of an issue for them. Helmingast loosing more arrows down the hill, that may also prove to be a problem. It's always hard to keep track of how these basic archers are doing in a battle like this, but the Helmingast and the Riddermark archers have been getting some good volleys into Dunland so far, and into some of their more important units like the Black Wolds. Some Warg Riders moving in. Dunman Hunters as well, so again, these Wargs are not going to be too useful going further forward in the battle, but maybe you could use them to mass push a little bit later on. Rohan holding onto the hill, Westmark infantry backed up by some Eastmark Spearmen, as the Half-Orc Spearguard continue to push up the hill and engage the Rohirrim. Some Black Wolds, what very little remains of those units, also moving in. Oof. And there we can see some axes being thrown by the Shieldmanes. We've already seen the Trollshaw axe throwers do some damage to Rohan, so now time to give them a taste of their own medicine. The Shieldmanes are the superior axe thrower unit as well, and they're getting some good volleys there into the front of the Half-Orc Spearguard, so the shields and armour will help them, but you can see here the base damage is still going to be too much, and this unit of Half-Orc Spearguard getting scythed through as it stands. Not great for them. Dunland do need to rely on their numbers after all, so the more heavy damage they take like that, the less likely it's going to be they can overcome the more high quality Rohirrim units that are going to be defending the Golden Hall itself. Shieldmaidens meanwhile are over here. Do they have the range? That's impressive throwing distance if they do. Looks like a cancelled shot. I'm going to say they should look to enter the Olympics if they've got a throw that good. Dunlanding veterans, Gwathlo trackers moving in, so Dunland still trying to make good use of their ranged units. Clansmen joining the veterans within the walls now. We still have some Baneguard out there as well, Riders of Orthanc over on this side. Still trying to go after the Trollshaw Axos with a couple of volleys, which they are one of the more dangerous units for Rohan to have to deal with now, the Trollshaw Axos, for the same reason that we just saw the Shield Maidens are. Very dangerous unit this. Helmengas, Westmark Infantry taking a few volleys from the Guathlo trackers, but the shields are pointing in the right direction, so it's not the end of the world by any means. Meanwhile, Westmark Infantry starting to take a few more losses, and the sheer numbers on the front line, Half-Orc Spearguard, obviously Dunland Hunters are not very good in melee at all, but just a case of trying to throw those numbers forward and slowly but surely overwhelm the fighters of Rohan. MEDUSELD guard in close proximity. Looks like some Helmengas that are out of ammunition, and they do make decent makeshift line infantry. Obviously they're not going to win any prizes for killing off higher tier units, but against stuff like Dunland Hunters they will be absolutely fine. Something else that Rohan can count on as the battle goes through its phases. Are Dunland going to try and move around this way? For now it doesn't look like it. Maybe with only 2 armies they feel as though they can, and they're going to have to focus on the main route in. Dunland clansmen moving up the hill, engaging the Westmark infantry, but this isn't a fight that's going to go too well for these spearmen. Armour upgrade or no, they are going to need some more assistance. Baneguard are coming up here. Perhaps one thing I would be a little bit concerned about from Dunland is, do they have the infantry required to sustain these assaults? They've got plenty of skirmishes that they can utilise to their advantage. Yeah, these wargs just charging in, and even though the Westmark infantry don't have an anti-cavalry bonus, they're going to easily be able to finish off these wargs. A few Baneguard arriving on the front line now. More of a worthy opponent perhaps, but maybe not in the numbers they're going to be committed. Arrows shrieking overhead. Trollshot Axos, are they out of ammunition? If they are, then fair enough, but again it's more of just a chaff unit that's being committed here. They need something with a little bit more punch here, Dunland, if they're going to hope to get through all of these Westmark infantry units, which Rohan are basing their defence around currently. So far so good. I think Rohan will be quite pleased with the situation they're currently in. The initial defences Dunland did quite well, but now Rohan are back into shape, and I'm not sure if Dunland are going to have the quality necessary to punch through here in an efficient manner. Answer forces evenly matched. There's not much of the Westmark infantry left, so they're going to be a little bit more reliant on more basic units like Eastmark spearmen to hold this line, so perhaps Dunland could utilise that to their advantage. What else do we have? Shield Maidens. There's still missiles flying over the battlefield. There is some Riders of Orthanc. Now they are in a position to try and shoot with their crossbows, but what are they going to try and shoot at? A decent amount of Baneguard arriving on the front line as well, which will be very important to try and help deal with those Westmarks in melee. And those Guathlo trackers still trying to utilise their arrows to soften Rohan up so that their lower quality infantry can make the impacts they want it to. So far, Spears of Orthanc also in position. Some Half-Orc Baneguard out there which may need to start moving forward. What's going on over here? Riders of Orthanc? What are they shooting at? Are they shooting at the Riddermark archers? Doesn't look like they're shooting at anything. How curious. In a nice position for archers to take up this on Edoras, even though they are only basic. If Rohan can keep this sort of pressure up, they will be feeling very confident about their chances going further forward in this battle. And that is also a good sign for Rohan. Dunland Hunters, plenty of them moving forward. You can see here the Dunland clansmen have really struggled against the Westmark infantry. Not much damage has been done to the ROHIRRIC at all. And the Dunland clansmen, to be fair, have held up better in melee kills wise than I thought they would, but the morale is obviously not looking so great at this point in time. Shield Maidens launching a volley of axes overhead. The Baneguard are already shaken up as well. More quality and more numbers needed from Dunland. They need to be brave here, otherwise their morale is simply going to fail them more and more as the ROHIRRIC shield wall continues to be unrelenting. But I do like the look of the Westmark units. They're very aesthetically pleasing, as Rohan should be. The green capes add quite a lot to them as well, I think. Shield Maidens of Rohan moving in. Still projectiles flying downhill from Rohan, and the Blackwolds are on the front line, so it's not too surprising to see the Riddermark archers try to do the business against them. Shield Maidens of Rohan will also be wanting to get volleys in there. They'll be ideal against the Black Wolves after all. Gwathlo trackers, looks like they just ran out of ammunition, but they've been firing into the Rohan defence as well. Wargs coming in, are they going to try and push through? Again, it's not ideal this for the Black Wolves, but needs must. In come the Wargs, are they going to try and mass push their way through this front line? Not the worst idea, because it isn't the most populated defence anymore. It looks as though he is. Like I said, this could be the way forward. It's the only way the Wargs are going to be useful after all, so you may as well utilise them in this manner. They will also get in the way of those throwing axes that the Shield Maidens are utilising. Shield Maidens are moving down the hill. There's 2 units of them here actually, as well as a unit of Helmengast. The Wargs are going to go no further, but they may very well have already secured some gains. Again, another volley of throwing axes coming in there, continuing to punish the Dunlanders as they try to make their way uphill. Now you can see Westmark Spearmen taking some hits from those Trollshort axe throwers. The axe throwers of both sides have proven to be one of the most key units here, as now the Trollshort axe throwers start to ravage the Rohan front line as well. Both the Helmengast and the Westmark infantry taking losses in these volleys. See here now Gwathlo trackers being added to the front line. This one unit of Westmark infantry has probably done extremely well for itself as it continues to fight downhill, showcasing its superior abilities in melee. Still continuing to throw those throwing axes in. Some Shield Maidens falling down now as well. There's 2 units? No, it is just the 1 unit. Weird though, half of it seems to be in loose formation and half of it does not. Dunman Hunters on the front line backing up the Vanguard as they continue to try and move in. That armour piercing giving them an edge now with the losses sustained at the hands of those Trollshore axe throwers. All of a sudden things not looking quite so bleak for the Vanguard on this front line, and they may have what it takes to get what is now primarily a Helmengast based front line to falter. Meanwhile, Dunland have made some gains up the hill now. Some out of ammunition Shield Maidens are fighting on the front, and they will be able to outperform Gwathlo trackers. Still some Wargs left alive as well. Surprised it didn't rout actually, but it was quite a heroic push that from the Warg Riders. And sorely needed as well by Dunland if they hope to have any sort of success in this battle. Meanwhile, there were those Riders of Orthanc. And there is actually a bit of a defence over here as well. A not insubstantial unit as well. The Helms Hammers in full shield wall formation. Some half-orc spearguard ready to push up here if they need to. And that will keep the Helms Hammers occupied maybe, although Coffee I think is going to try and deal with them right now. Need to be a little bit careful with Trollshore axe throwers on the way. Still got a cavalry unit as well which they could try and use to break out with Helms Deep style later on. Meanwhile, a Rohan getting a little bit too big for their boots perhaps, so they want to regroup their formation a little bit. Some of these units getting a little bit further away from support. Yes, all of these units are the sort of thing they can defeat, but they are in a little bit of bother. Trollshore axe throwers out of ammunition, but they've already done a good amount of damage, so they're now going to get into melee and also do what they can. Dunman Hunters adding themselves to the half-orc Baneguard, and I think now Rohan are going to start to pull back. Maybe leave a rear guard of the Helmengast, but I think they see that Dunland are going to be able to get up on top of the hill now, and it will be a straight shot all the way to the Golden Hall. Will they be able to sit upon the throne of Edoras once more? We shall have to see. Rohan continuing to fight hard on the front line. A little bit surprised to not see any Dunman pikemen for Dunland. Phalanxes are the sort of thing that Rohan can struggle with after all. More Dunlanding clansmen and veterans making their way forward, so more infantry from ROHIRRIC which can be used in the late game, which will be necessary of course. Riders of Orthanc, what are they firing at exactly? Just trying to launch a few bolts over the hill. Any bolt that hits will probably be enough to kill a Westmark Spearman. Oof, and there you can see there. Grisly. Now, Helmengast, are they going to try and escape? They are. They should just about manage it as well. I don't think the Baneguard are going to be able to stop them from doing that. And every man will be useful when trying to defend the final stand, as these wild men and half-orcs start to surge forwards into another Rohirrim shield wall, who they've performed quite well with those so far. Well, the Helms Hammers have moved down here. And you can see here the Trollshot axe throwers trying to use their throwing axes, and to a certain extent they've been successful. Several of the Helms Hammers are bloodied up, but those massive shields that they wield mean that throwing axes are less of a problem for them than pretty much any other unit on the field today. And in pure melee, well, I mean, with their backs turned, this could be the moment where those Trollshot axe throwers could do a really good job. I mean, you can see here the Half-Orc Spearguard didn't particularly enjoy their tryst with the Helms Hammers, but that is to be expected. They are wavering. Need to be careful. They're wavering. As they retreat, that could be enough to make them rout. They're coming back. Some of the Helms Hammers are a little bit cut off from the rest of their unit. Any one of them you can kill would be a real boon going into the late game. Meanwhile, how much ammunition in their archers do they still have left? Still got some throwing axes from their shield maidens, which will be very useful. In come the Westmark Marshals. We'll probably start to see more of this calibre of unit now. Higher end axemen, stuff like the MEDUSELD Guard. We've already seen the Helms Hammers in action after all. Unit of Westmark Spearmen stopping the further advance of these Dunland Hunters. Defeat seems certain for them. To the surprise of precisely no one, I'm sure. You can see the axes and maces of the Bane Guard starting to make their way to the front as well. Much better placed for dealing with these spearmen. What else we got? Still got wargs as well, sort of anchoring this front line to a certain extent. Helmengas on the front. Here we got some archers, Riddermark archers, firing in now. It's a decent blob. Quite a few lightly armoured units as well, so the Riddermark archers won't do too badly in terms of kills there. Interesting to see how much damage these basic, how many kills I should say, these basic units of archers have been able to accrue come the end of the battle. Because against targets like those, they should do quite nicely. Riders of Orthanc. This is going to be pretty nasty. You can see they're throwing axes coming in. Bane Guard, Blackwolds. They might be trying to go after the Riders of Orthanc, but they're not quite reaching that far. The amount of damage they're doing is actually kind of limited. That was a bit of a better volley. And another one coming in there as well. More of the Dunland invaders fall with every throwing axe utilised. Another unit of Shield Maidens moving over there. Obviously the morale boosting effect of the Shield Maidens actually doesn't work like any of those doesn't in this present version of the game, but that will be fixed momentarily, I'm sure, with the ever closer next patch. Feels like I've been talking about that for ages now, but that might be because I have actually been talking about it for ages. Meanwhile, Snaga skirmishes. They're really doing their best to try and utilise their throwing axes and their javelins to be the thing to bring down the Helms Hammers, and you have to say they've actually done a pretty good job of it. Their backs are exposed. A few more javelin volleys will be enough to really worry the Helms Hammers. Trollshot axe throwers in place as well. Yeah, it's going to be really nasty for the Helms Hammers. Their hit points will be depleted, and without those shields coming into play, these Trollshot axe throwers will be enough to do significant damage to them, and then of course they can be overwhelmed in melee. So a bit of a loss that for Rohan. The Helms Hammers. Meanwhile, Westmark Marshals, my personal favourite Rohan unit, getting onto the front right now. That armour piercing will be nice. Against some of the better Rohirrim units, against the half-orc units, it'll make them much more well equipped to deal with the situation, but there's also Spears of Orthanc over here. Armour piercing will be very necessary to bring down units like this. Very heavily armoured indeed. Saruman's finest works. Crossbow bolts coming in. They're having to arc their shots slightly, but they're still scoring good hits. And with the fact that all of the Orthanc units are still up and operational, that could prove to be a real problem for Rohan going into the late game. Gwathlo trackers, they've got their bows out, so they should still have a bit of ammunition. Are they going to try and counter skirmish perhaps? MEDUSELD Guard utilising their javelins. Not on the strongest of units though, to be fair, but this is enough to cause quite a few of these Dunlander units to rout. Westmark Marshals pushing forward as a result. Only a single unit of Dunland Hunters remains on the front line, and they won't last for too much longer under arrow fire and under those axe blows, you would have to guess. Green banners of Rohan start to march forward once again. against the Silver Surfer banners of Dunland, something which doesn't have a model yet, which I'm sure will change. Another unit of Westmark Spearmen in position, which will actually be necessary now that the Helms Hammers have been really completely destroyed. Once again, Coffey being outmanoeuvred by Dunland and one of his best units being destroyed as a result. Is this the sort of thing which is going to bode well for Dunland going into the late game? We shall have to wait and see. Snaga skirmishes also moving forwards. Still got these red shields. What are they going to be firing at? Going to be utilised as regular archers. Okay, I do like these red Rohirrim units. I do like the axemen on foot a little bit more. But these guys are pretty cool as well. Riddermark archers out of ammunition. They won't offer much in melee, but neither do the Dunman hunters, and they've still been a very important part of how Dunland have done their business here. Westmark spearmen and marshals continuing to do damage against the rank and file of Dunland. More missiles coming in. Need to be careful about friendly fire here, Rohan. Dunland crossbow bolts whizzing overhead. Victory seems certain for the Dunman Hunters. That has to be because of the support they're getting. Another unit of Dunman Hunters moves forward. They must be sick of the sight of them at this point. Low tier though they may be, there seems to be an almost limitless supply of these wild men. And that's a good volley, that, from the javelins. Right into the heart of the mounted and dismounted Orthanc unit. Going to need more of that. Our Rohan. More missiles being loosed as well. The missiles from both sides here proving to be perhaps the decisive thing in the battle. Neither side renowned for their tanky infantry, albeit I think Rohan have fared better in that regard throughout this battle so far. A few lapses in organisation have allowed Dunland to do well in parts, but for the most part Rohan's superiority in melee has been fairly clear. But Dunland have also been utilising their range units pretty well. Just moving in with the Riders of Orthanc now, pulling out those Morning Stars of theirs, and utilising their cavalry in this manner. Need to be a little bit careful, but against stuff like Helmingas it will be fine. Trying to use their mass. Riddermark archers and shield mains of Rohan moving in to make sure the Riders of Orthanc cannot push all the way through. There's simply too many bodies in the way. Let's see then, back here, those red shields continue to fire. They've still got more Westmark marshals, MEDUSELD guard and shield maidens, but Rohan's army looking a little bit smaller now. There's those Westmark spearmen as well, using the terrain as cover. 28 half-orc spear guard, not going to be enough to break all the way through. Troll short axe throws also moving forward. They are going to charge in. That one unit of Westmark spearmen going to be tasked with holding the line for a little while longer yet. And they should be able to for now. I think the only thing down here as well is Snaga skirmishers. Oh, some half-orc spear guard. I don't know. Those Westmark spears will be enough for the moment, and indeed they will have to be enough for the moment, because most of Rohan's strength is going to be needed to help hold this main road. Dunlanding clansmen moving forward. Still crossbow bolts and arrows being flung in. Some Blackwalds down there, that's a significant unit, as well as some clansmen over here. They are going to need a little bit more on the front line, Dunland as well. They need to make sure they keep up the pressure on Rohan. If they filter in individual units of lower quality, or start to do that, that's where their whole attack could unravel in disastrous style. Still those Riders of Orthanc swinging their maces, but ultimately they are going to struggle, especially if they come into contact with any stray Westmark marshals. Those two-handed axes, not the sort of thing that Dunlanding riders will want to encounter. MEDUSELD guard are in here as well, 61 of them. That is a really high quality unit, which is going to have some kind of response from Dunland, surely. They're going to need more than just a battered unit of riders and one unit of Dunlanding clansmen to keep up the pressure on Rohan. Guathlo trackers trying to fire over the top, trying to go after the Westmark Marshals, who are going to try and take cover behind the palisade. Second unit of MEDUSELD Guard is significant as well. Meanwhile, another Rohan shield wall that Dunland have to throw themselves against. Rohan won't be able to keep up this sort of thing for too much longer, but do Dunland have enough left in the tank to make them falter? I'm not sure. I think with those, it's going to come down to how effective I think something like the Spears of Orthanc can be in melee. With all of Rohan's armour piercing they still have left, that may prove to be a problem. Westmark Marshals could yet prove to be a bit of a match winner. Arrows still being utilised. Meanwhile, shield mains of Rohan breaking forward to try and interrupt the Spears of Orthanc. A brave move, but the shield mains will not be able to defeat these armour-clad Dunlanders in melee, but that perhaps is not the point. They just want to try and stop them. Oof, taking a crossbow bolt to the gut and still fighting on. This is 2 units of Spears of Orthanc, but they have succeeded in their endeavour. Forward come the Black Walds as well. This could be the key moment of the fight. Forward come the Westmark Marshals, these armour-piercing axes. Not the sort of thing the Spears of Orthanc will like facing, but 1-to-1 they should still win this fight because they are the superior unit of the two. But the whole cohesion of the front line now, it's big this. Rohan have committed forwards, and now it's basically whoever has the superior strength will win. And I think Rohan see that because the second unit of MEDUSELD Guard is also going to be committed forward. They're not leaving too much to chance. Defeat seems certain. A few of the Spears of Orthanc are falling by the wayside, but this is where Dunland will be at their strongest. Both units of Spears of Orthanc are now committed in melee. Starting to get more and more bloodied. Still a Rider of Orthanc up here as well. He's lasted a surprisingly long time. In melee with a bunch of infantry. Black Walds, their presence on the front line with no missiles around to weaken them is really significant. There goes Dunland General though. Sort of morale shock is going to be a potential problem for the Dunlanders. Not many of their units are renowned for having that higher morale. They've still got a unit of archers online here. They are firing right into the air. They should probably be trying to fire at those Westmark Marshals, as the Spears of Orthanc are now going to try and retreat away from the Westmark Marshals. Those axes doing their thing. A unit of 252 Dunlanding clansmen moving forward. That's a lot of Dunlanders to still have to try and deal with. Another unit of Black Walds is down there as well, so Dunland should have enough left in the tank in theory to go on to win this fight. They continue to push down the hill here, the Westmark Marshals, bravely going into all of these Orthanc units, but on their own I'm not sure whether they're going to have enough. I don't blame Overlord for taking this tactic, because if he allows these crossbowmen to continue to do their thing, Rohan will certainly lose, but I'm not sure whether Rohan are going to have enough here, is the issue. Red shields. Again, there's another attack to have to try and deal with over here. I was wondering where that one unit of Dunlanding veterans went, and it is over here. And with their numbers, they're slowly but surely pushing back against these Westmark spearmen as well. More bad news for Rohan. Still arrows from those Guathlo trackers as well. Those Westmark Marshals, they're dying at an alarming rate now, and they will surely rout. I did say this could prove to be the decisive moment in the battle, and it looks as though Dunland have had the better of it. The other Dunland General does fall though. Could that be decisive? Could that drop in morale be enough? Guathlo trackers are wavering. Stuff like the Dunlanding clansmen though are still confident in close proximity to units of strength like the Spears of Orthanc. They're not looking like routing just yet. Black Walds on the front lines, starting to take more losses, but Rohan's front line itself is looking... Again, that second unit of MEDUSELD Guard has retreated. They're going to be needed on the front line now, I feel. Otherwise, this is going to start to fall apart. There they are. Is it going to be too little too late, though? Riders of Orthanc could try and go round the side and try and secure Dunland's victory here. And here come the other unit of Wargs, and that's exactly what they're going to try and do. Munching into the side of the Westmark Marshals. In come the other unit of MEDUSELD Guard now. I guess we'll see just how strong the MEDUSELD Guard are in melee at this stage. What happened to the red shields? They would be quite useful to try and deal with the wargs here. Another unit of shield maidens has revealed itself. Now, if they still have ammunition, that could prove to be really key, but the wargs all over them, right from the off. And there's riders of Orthanc here as well, so they may very well have left it a little bit too long and left a gap in their defences. They still have throwing axes, Rohan, it's not over. The damage they could do with them could be really, really significant. The red shields are moving forward now to push back against the mounted units that Dunland were trying to interrupt them with. This is the best use for a unit of melee cavalry like this now, even though the riders will defeat them in one-to-one combat. If they can buy time for... Do they have ammunition? It's hard to tell. They're still being engaged in melee to a certain extent. I mean, if it's just another melee unit, I'm not sure whether that will be enough. Oh, they're pulling out axes again. Yeah, they do still have ammo. They are going to fire in some volleys. I mean, they can scarcely miss. They're going to hit something regardless of what they do, but it's not the best angle, this. 16 Riddermark archers. Everything is just being rallied to the front line at this point, but I think it's just a matter of timing that may cost Rohan very dearly here. Meanwhile, Bouncer Force is evenly matched. As time goes on, actually, these Westmark spearmen are consistently taking no losses, and the Dunlanding veterans not able to batter their way through the shield wall, so this is a bit of a respite for Rohan. They won't need to commit anything else over here to stop the veterans from capping the town centre. Whether that will be enough to help them secure victory in the battle overall remains to be seen. Continue to throw those axes in overhead. I don't know, I mean, they're hitting Snago by the looks of things, not exactly the few spears of Orthanc also falling. I mean, they're killing things, if nothing else. Riddermark archers, MEDUSELD Guard. It looks like a really chaotic fight, which tends to favour the more numerous attackers, but I don't know how well these wargs and riders of Orthanc are going to continue to hold up. Still Westmark marshals in there. That armour-piercing edge will still be useful against the remaining Orthanc units, which continue to do their thing on the front line. The warg riders have broken. The riders of Orthanc, though, are continuing to get right up into the face of the shield maidens, and really Coffey needs to get his red shields in there to stop this from happening. These axe throwers are far more important to your cause than a unit of melee cavalry at this point. Riders of Orthanc, lucky they didn't charge into the back of those Riddermark archers then, and they just nudged in. That's a pretty wicked looking weapon. Cross between a club and a pick. Could it be a one-handed mattock? No. That'd be more of a flat hammer on one side. Westmark spearmen will be victorious over here, though. That much is sure. So they may actually be able to free up a unit of spearmen later on. Battle of fine margins, this is going to come down to very small differentials, this. Shieldmaidens of Rohan are being left alone by the riders of Orthanc now, and indeed the riders' rout. Bit of a mistake that they should have just left the riders of Orthanc in melee with the Shieldmaidens to stop these throwing axes from being used, because this is how Rohan could win the battle. And that could prove to be a terrible mistake. Spears of Orthanc, now both units of them trying to use their crossbow bolts in the same manner as the Shieldmaidens are using their throwing axes. MEDUSELD Guard being overwhelmed by Spears of Orthanc. There goes another volley from the throwing axes. More Spears of Orthanc fall. Another one bites the dust. Yeah, they're going to be able to overwhelm Rohan on the front line here, though. And that, I think, is going to be the difference. Snaga skirmishes do rout, though. 87 Snaga skirmishes. Not made of particularly stern stuff, are they? Continue to try and chop their way through, but still with some Spears of Orthanc, still with a few Blackwolds in there, 64 Blackwolds. I think that's going to be too much for them. I think they may have just run out of ammunition as well, the Shield Maidens, and they are also being engaged in melee by 23 Spears of Orthanc, and they're not going to be quite up to the task in melee of bringing down the heavily armoured warriors. And I don't believe a unit of battle-weary Westmark Spears is going to be enough for Rohan either. Again, I'm not entirely sure why the red shields are coming over here. That's something that Coffee has been extremely poor with in this battle. I think the use of his cavalry has been pretty dreadful. Which, when you consider that he's brought 2 expensive units of cavalry, could end up being the difference between victory and defeat here for the Rohirrim. A newer player, so I don't want to be too critical. But yeah, it's definitely an area that needs work. If you're going to bring cavalry to the defence, you need to be decisive with it, and you need to know how to utilise it properly. Otherwise, it's just going to end up being largely wasteful. And that waste is not something you can afford when you're on the defence against a very numerous foe like Dunland. And Dunland, I think, have handled their business in exactly the manner you would expect. It's been costly for them. And they may yet lose, but I think they do have the advantage in this fight, which I doubt they're going to be surrendering. Defeat seems certain. Perpetually routing Riddermark spears in the town centre. But yeah, they've attacked, they've kept up the pressure, and it does look as though they're going to be enough to wear Rohan down. Yeah, 2 Riddermark archers and a shield maiden going after this singular spear of Orthanc. That armour is going to be difficult for these swords to crack through. Victory seems certain. I find that hard to believe. Whatever happened to those Black Lords? They fall by the wayside that quickly? I mean, I guess they did. They must be out of their hit points because they are dying at a rather alarming rate. But I mean, Dunland are going to be victorious here, but will they have enough to bring down a unit of battle-weary spears in a fight for the town centre? We shall have to wait and see. Units advance. You know, Snaga are not coming back. They are running for the hills, and that could yet be the difference. Killing off those 2 Dunlander generals could prove to be the thing which matters. Still a lot of these clansmen though. 54 of them. All too happy to attack their most hated enemy. Defeat is almost a certainty. Those barbed spears raining blows down upon the few Rohirric defenders that remain outside Edoras' palisade. Continue to try and do their best, but there's 14 spears of Orthanc there. 12 there, that's a lot of elite units. When you combine them, 14 Riddermark spears are done. To be fair, this unit of cavalry could yet prove to be really useful if it was cycle charging in, but he's just barging in to this front line impotently. And that is a problem. Dunlanding veterans, though, performing really quite poorly against this Rohirrim shield wall. I'm sure the Dunland players will be quite disappointed with the performance of these veterans in their attempt to take the back way into the town centre. But oh well. They're still occupying this unit, perhaps long enough for the rest of Dunland to move in and take the town centre for themselves. Riddermark archers moving in with those Riddermark spearmen. Not going to be enough, they will be crushed underfoot really. Continue to fight. Riddermark archers rout immediately. Is that the general? I believe it is it not? Yes. He's all on his lonesome over here, because Rohan, I believe they've lost the general yet, have they? As he continues to kill clansmen. But yeah, I think now what they want to do is capture the town centre so those Westmark spearmen cannot get back into shape. And they can see that that is going to happen, and that will allow the Dunlanding veterans to get over here as well. So needs must for Overlord. He's going to try and just bulk up on the TC and hope that 76 Westmark spearmen are going to be enough. That's not a small number of spears. So it is going to be close, closer perhaps than it has any right to be. I would still give the slight edge perhaps to Dunland. I mean, a large part of it does boil down to how much damage stuff like the spears of Orthanc and Black Lords have taken, I guess. Again, the red shields just blocking the way. Any damage they can do will be just a bonus, but yeah, those spears of Orthanc are going to be able to rip them to shreds in melee, although they're pulling back. Dunlanding veterans follow the Westmark spearmen in. 7 Trollshore Axlers as well, but units of 7 at this point could prove to be the difference, so everything needs to be committed. Still a not insubstantial amount of time left to go as well, which is rather surprising. It leads me to believe Dunland are actually not going to be all that... wow, really? Did the general really rout all of them? Where is he? Is he around here somewhere? There he is. So yeah, this one man, Theoden, has managed to rout off an entire unit of 44 Dunland clansmen, and with that rout, that may be enough. There goes Coffey's general, but that's not really the most important thing because the Red Shields are the only unit he has left anyway. That's pretty incredible. That unit of 44 Dunland clansmen would have given them the numbers to make them feel comfortable. In terms of the quality of the units they still have left to them, they should still win this Dunland, especially seeing as they've now surrounded the Westmark Spearmen. Wavering though, the Dunlanding veterans. More basic units of Dunland could yet flee once more. And now Theoden moves in once again. If nothing else, again, just killing off another spear. What an absolute hero. Done incredibly well for himself, and now he's... he just needs to keep these 8 spears of Orthanc from moving in to assist the assault. That is not an... I mean, based on the margins here, that is the sort of thing which could make the difference. Can he stay alive, though, is the question. He kills off another one. Yeah, there he goes. He did far better than he had any right to, though. These 7 spears of Orthanc are now free to move in and try and help out against the Westmark Spearmen, who are shaken at the loss of the general, but they should look at it as inspiration more than anything else. So, 49 Westmark Spearmen against what is essentially a little under 20 spears of Orthanc and a few other dregs from other units, including 11 Blackwolds. It's going to be close. I mean, like I said, the quality of units means that Dunland should win it. Yeah, this is going to be it, so we might as well go to times 2 speed, really. When you're talking about a spear versus spear fight, I can see now why there's still 5,000 frames left, even though it's only a small thing. They're trying to shoot them at point-blank range, which may not actually be the way to go about things here for Dunland, because it's going to be difficult for them to get shots, and they're superior in melee, so they should perhaps simply be looking to engage them in combat. As it is, the fact that they're trying to reload is giving the Westmark Spears a chance to land more hits. And that could be the thing which yet gives Rohan a most unlikely victory. That armour from the Spears of Orthanc, though, is going to be a massive problem for the Westmark Spears. They don't have the armour piercing that the Spears of Orthanc have. They've got the Spear Malice, so it's going to be really difficult for them to do damage through the Orthanc armour, and that might be the thing which makes all the difference here. Yeah, victory seems certain. I don't think Rohan are going to have quite enough. It's been a very valiant effort here in the late game. But we shall see. What are they doing? Ooh, that's a terrible idea. What is Ruvik doing? Is he going to try and shoot the Westmark Spears? He is. I mean, if he gets some good volleys, I mean, fair enough, but you're taking an awful risk. You would have won in melee. You also could end up getting a bit of friendly fire. Tiny Pants. His are now wavering. Again, friendly fire. What are they doing? That could be one of the biggest throws I've ever seen. If this go... I mean, the Dunland players, organisationally, have done very well up until this point. But that could end up being the most dreadful error in judgment I've seen. If Dunland don't go on to win this fight, if the Spears of Orthanc are not quite enough to bring these Westmark Spears down... And I'm not sure, you know, I mean, 11 versus 28, it's going to be close. Individually they're stronger, but if the Spears of Orthanc lose too many unit models, they're just going to end up getting overwhelmed. Could be one of the closest ends to a fight I've seen. I think everyone will be rooting for Rohan to win at this stage because of how unlikely their victory would have been. They're steady. Westmark Spears are eager and exhausted. Spears of Orthanc are merely tired. These are the margins now that we're looking at to see who will win and who will lose. A couple more spears fall. I mean, this is it. This is only the snowball effect can come into play here, because the more Spears of Orthanc fall, the more the numbers advantage of the Westmark Spearmen is going to really come into effect. Another one goes. 28. They've got a numbers advantage of 20 at this point. The Spears of Orthanc are going to be less likely to kill off these ROHIRRIC warriors. He's going to try and escape again to try and kite, but you can't kite with crossbows, I'm afraid. They fire too slowly. I mean, he's made his bed and he now has to lie in it, I suppose. But he's not going to be able to get away. He's not going to be able to get clear daylight between him and the Westmark Spears enough to utilise that ammunition. And he has no choice, really. He's going to have to get closer, and then the Westmark Spears... I mean, for Overlord, you just need to charge into melee with them. And that's exactly what he's going to do. And they're going to rout the Spears of Orthanc if they continue to stretch their unit like this. There goes another one. Yeah, that is remarkable. That is one of the biggest throws I've seen in the game. All they needed to do was stay in melee with the Westmark Spears, and the combined strength of both Spears of Orthanc units would have been enough. Their armour, so difficult for the Westmark Spears to crack through, but by dividing themselves like that, they allowed the numbers of the Rohirrim Spears to really take hold. And it's a shame, really, because Dunland, for the most part in this fight, handled it in exactly the right way. Textbook. Organisationally, their attack was decent, but that was a shocking error in judgment by ROHIRRIC. I'm sure that he won't be making that mistake again. But yes, the difference between the two. A little under 30. Westmark Spears, all that remains as Rohan successfully defend their capital from a Dunland invasion. A highly Pyrrhic victory, but a thrilling one nonetheless. As the final Spear of Orthanc gets run through. Oh, no, there is another one in there. Surrounded on all sides. And that's going to be it.
It could have been we that were slain and defeated on the field, but fate has been kind and delivered us victory.
Yes, fate was kind to Rohan here. Very impressive battle, that. Big thank you to Overlord for sending it to me again. Just like the Toll for Last one last time that he sent me. Although that was an older replay, this one much more recent, at least at the time of recording. But yeah, it seems to be the most thrilling of fights that I'm getting from Overlord these days. So big thank you to him. Again, I'm sure ROHIRRIC will be disappointed with how his ploy to try and use what crossbow bolts he had left went. But ultimately, this should serve as a cautionary tale. Just because you have ammunition left doesn't mean it's necessarily the right thing to try and utilise all of it. Those Spears of Orthanc would have been enough to win Dunland the fight in melee in that town centre with both of their units combined. Dividing their forces, however, allowed Rohan the way back into the fight that they so desperately needed. And even the slight missteps that Coffee, a newer player, made throughout this fight, they were not enough to make up for that one. It goes to show how significant that was, because normally the attackers can afford to make misplays, but at that point in the battle, it was too much to try and come back from. So let's see what did the damage for the Rohirrim. 405 kills and 4 Westmark Spearmen doing very, very well. Under normal circumstances against higher quality opposition, they perhaps wouldn't do quite so well. But here against the more basic Dunlanders, especially against those Dunland veterans, a very impressive performance by the Westmark Spears. MEDUSELD Guard did alright, but by the time they were committed, of course, it was a very serious fight with serious units, so you would imagine that they would do slightly worse, but 116 is still respectable. Westmark Infantry, differing fates for them. Westmark Marshals, for the same reason as the MEDUSELD Guard, they were committed when things were getting a little bit hairy, and of course those Westmark Marshals were also sent behind enemy lines to try and disrupt the Spears of Orthanc, and killing those generals could very well have had a really significant and profound effect. And then several units getting over 200 and 100 kills down here. Shield Maidens, all of the ranged units really. Shield Maidens doing the best of the bunch. Riddermark Archers doing very nicely as well. Eastmark Spearmen and Helmengast performing on fairly average. As for this army down here, for Coffee actually, the Westmark Marshals did substantially better, 312. Westmark Infantry, perhaps this was the earlier point in the fight when Dunland was still trying to advance up the hill, where his infantry was doing very nicely. Shield Maidens of Rohan doing nicely for both Rohirrim armies, of course, but yeah, pretty much what you would expect. The heavier Rohirrim units doing quite nicely against the Dunlanders. Stuff like the Shield Maidens and the ranged units also because of the lighter armour that Dunland are going to be rolling into battle with. Special mention as well to Overlord's General, who managed to rout off those Dunlanding clansmen all by himself, which that did make the difference, because 44 Dunlanding clansmen would have made this an easy Dunland victory. That would have been far too much for the Westmark spearmen to handle, especially with the Spears of Orthanc in support. But there you go. It's that kind of margin. Rohan had their generals, Dunland didn't. Rohan go on to win. So yeah, one of the best sieges of Edoras. It was only a 2v2, which in terms of scale, we've seen far bigger sieges of Edoras in the past, but rarely have we seen an Edoras siege so thrilling and so lore-friendly. So that is something worth celebrating as well. So big thank you to Overlord for sending this replay in. Long may this sort of thing continue. And big thank you to all the players that were a part of this battle replay. And hopefully I do get more replays from Overlord. Of course, I'm recording these in bulk, so it bears repeating again that I will be needing more replays, especially for the upcoming week off that I have, because I do intend to record in bulk while I'm visiting back home. And I won't be able to record every single day. There are other things I would like to do with my time off than just recording this, of course, but it does give me a little bit more freedom to record, unlike the normal working schedule that I'm on. But yeah, hopefully that will happen. Also, like I said, I might be doing a channel update during that week. It kind of depends on how much information I actually have by then. It might be that channel update needs to wait until like late August, early September, rather than late July, but we'll see. It kind of depends on how much in detail I'm able to plan for the latter portion of the year, latter third really. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you will join me for whatever is next.